Hey, what's going on guys, I'm Primalliquid, and in this video I'm going to go over the new best way to farm materials for Metal Gear Survive. Now, unfortunately, the most recent patch, 1.03, actually completely destroyed the method of just doing solo salvage missions. So now, unfortunately, we've had to find a new method, but this one is almost as good. Granted, you don't really get much Cuban energy, however, materials-wise, it's not too bad to be perfectly honest, and is currently the best way of farming materials. Now, some of you might have heard the term transporter runs if you've browsed Reddit or game FAQs at all. So what this method basically entails is starting from your base camp and going to each of the teleport stations, picking up all the loose items you can in each station, and then moving on to the next one. However, there is actually differences in the teleporter runs. Rather than just going through all the teleporter areas, it's actually better if you take a couple of minutes just to go out of the, out of a couple of specific teleport areas and hit a couple of other places. For example, in Afghan, both singularity areas on the map actually contain a drastically large amount of copper. I'm talking, you know, between 100 and 300 pieces of copper between them, and obviously copper is really important for making ammo, and so, you know, I mean, spending an extra 30 seconds to a minute going from the transporter to grab the copper is absolutely worthwhile, especially in singularity area 2 in Afghan, because that's where the most copper is. You can find a good 150 to 200 pieces of copper around there. Now, speaking of areas that you want to explore away from the transporters, in Africa, losing all my words here. In Africa, there's a base between Transporter 4 and Ruins 3. Now, realistically, a lot of people on Reddit think that this base was originally going to have a transporter. However, Konami took it out at the last minute simply due to how many high-end mats are actually up in Ruins 3 and near there. And so this is like, it's like one of the transporter bases, only it doesn't have a transporter. So you basically need to run from Transporter 4 all the way up on the north side of the map to this little base area. You can find quite some decent mats there as well, quite a lot of blue ones. From there, I recommend actually continuing on up the mountain to Code Talker's mansion, or as it is on the map, Ruins 3. However, you don't actually want to go inside the ruins. I mean, granted, you can if you want, however, there's not really much of value in there. So what I typically do on my material run is I go behind the mansion, just near where the tomato field is, because there's actually a stack of shelves there with more firing units, which is one of the most precious materials in the game since almost all blue and legendary guns require it. Same with the auto turrets, they all require firing units, and considering a full lap of just the transporters only nets you like 4 or 5, you know, it's definitely worth going out of your way to come up here and get these. Now, after you've done Ruins 3, I strongly recommend actually continuing north from Ruins 3, going up to the single house on its own, because again, there's a couple more firing units there. Now, if you're already in post-game, by little house, I mean where the final memory board is, where you actually unlock classes. Now, speaking of classes, let's talk about the optimum loadout for this run. Now, obviously, when you're gathering materials, the weight can add up very, very quickly. And so, what I really recommend as a loadout, like an exclusive loadout just for these material runs, is completely strip yourself of all gear. Remove all of your possessions, so you'll literally have no weight on you, apart from a couple of pieces of food to take with you. Now, aside from that, I do recommend taking, you know, just any normal green machete, pretty much any melee weapon, you know, as long as it's like a green or a white, you know, something with really low repair costs, it'll do perfectly fine. The only reason you want to take one is basically for if you want to gather any wood or any extra iron, you know, you've got something to break the boxes, break the barrels down, things like that. Now, aside from that, I do suggest equipping both survival bags. There's a small survival bag and a medium survival bag currently in the game. If you equip both of them, it will take your maximum weight limit up to 125 kilos, which in terms of Afghan, it actually allows you to hit almost every transport station without being weighed down. Same with Africa, you can hit most of them without being weighed down. However, before you actually go running up to the ruins, the base without the transporter, and the little house north of the ruins in Africa, I do recommend going back to the base and just emptying off your supplies, giving you, you know, an empty bag so you can actually pick up quite a lot of weight, because there is a large amount of steel up in those areas, which will drastically increase your weight very, very quickly. Now, in terms of what classes, it's a no-brainer. You've got to use the Scout class for this. If you use the Scout class with the ability called Scavenger, which picks up all the items in the area at once that you're near, you know what I mean, it just saves so much time. If you were doing this with the Scout class with Scavenger, an entire run of both Afghan and Africa only takes about 30 minutes and nets you around 6,000 materials. However, if you were doing this without the Scout class, keep in mind you would be spending a lot longer than 10-15 seconds at each transporter station, because you'd have to pick up every individual item on their own. So using the Scout class is a no-brainer. Now, aside from the Scavenger perk, one thing I really do recommend to do with the Scout, now unfortunately I didn't do it because I wasn't really paying too much attention when I was setting up my Scout, and now that I'm trying to do it, the Cuban resources to level up my Scout are astronomically high, and so, you know, I kind of shot myself in the foot here. But I really recommend actually upgrading your dex and endurance on the Scout as well, just so you have more stamina to sprint and you also sprint even faster. Now, that alone will pretty much be your 3 main skills for Scout if you don't have a level 20 Scout. However, one other thing I do recommend is for your main Scout perk, just take Stealth. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The other main perk is completely useless in this situation, and so Stealth, you know what I mean, it's the obvious choice. It will allow you to run almost all the way through Africa, you know, just completely fine, not getting aggroed by anything. So, again, you know, a no-brainer. Now, a few things I do want to quickly mention regarding this, though. Now, currently on Reddit, a lot of us are trying to figure out how to get the items to respawn. Originally, it used to be sleeping in-game for 3 days, but that is no longer the case anymore. It seems to be on a mix of real-world time and in-game playtime. So, I'm not really going to do a very good job of explaining this, I know I'm not, and so I apologise for that. However, I'm going to try anyway. So basically, to get the items to respawn, you have to spend a specific amount of time in-game actually playing. Now, currently, I've narrowed it down to between 3 and 6 hours. However, I can't narrow it down further than that. Now, whether it's a random amount of time in that sort of range, I don't know. It's entirely possible, but until I test more, I can't say for certain. Now, a few things do stop these timers, though. For example, if you are in co-op mode, the timer stops on the respawn. If you are, like, just in the game, but you've got the game paused, the timer will also stop, and of course if you aren't actually in the game, the timer stops as well. So basically, you know what I mean, if you're going to be AFK for 5-10 minutes, you know, just leave the game running, don't pause it. You'll have, as long as you're on 100 hunger and 100 thirst, you should survive quite easily, and at least then it passes the time, or just go with the stress signal farming in the meantime. But anyway guys, that's going to be it for this guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, hit that like button, leave a comment, and let me know down below what map you're struggling to find the most. I'm really curious and excited to see what sort of mats people are struggling with. I know the most common one is lead, so let me know what you're struggling with. But as always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.